Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at the Hisense L9G. This is the 120A12 model, I believe it is, for the UK, and I believe this is also the same unit that you actually get in Europe as well. I wanted to make this dedicated video on the actual projector and the screen, mainly because of the amount of differences that I actually found between this and also the American model, essentially the international model, because the majority of the videos and even the marketing and the literature that you'll actually see online, it all pretty much refers to what I see as the international or the American version. Whereas this UK version is actually quite a bit different compared to that one, and it actually loses out. And in some ways, it's quite a significant downgrade as well, depending on how you intend to actually use it. So initially we'll start with just the actual dimensions and everything. So what I'll do is for this part of it, I'll just take it off the actual tripod itself, and essentially from the outside this is exactly the same. So in terms of the actual main body, everything is identical apart from the rear connections. Now because I've got this set up in the location that I wanted, I don't really want to move it forward or anything because I've not actually marked the feet where it actually goes. I do have a iPhone photo which will probably show a bit better, but just showing the actual connections themselves. And the biggest sort of stumbling block and the biggest difference between this and the international model is the fact that all of the HDMI ports on this particular projector, the UK version or the European version, are HDMI 2.0. So we don't get any HDMI 2.1 ports, and that also means we don't get eARC support either. So this only has a ARC return, not an eARC return. So basically you don't get the better audio return via that channel. Now that for me isn't necessarily the end of the world, because I was always going to send my Apple TV through my LG soundbar, or if and when I upgrade to a receiver or an amplifier setup, a processor type setup, then obviously I'll be connecting whatever media devices directly through that device as well. So the eARC, it would be nice, it would be future-proofing, but it isn't necessarily a deal breaker. Right, the second biggest difference between this particular projector and the international model is the OS, or the operating system that's actually running on it. So this particular one comes with a sort of proprietary operating system that Hisense probably bought off somebody, or somebody's created for them, called Vidaa TV, VIDAA, and the international model basically runs Android. So obviously the Android operating system is a lot more useful, simply because obviously you can install whatever apps you want directly onto it. Now this one does actually come with Netflix as well as a few other apps already bundled and installed on it. So from that sense, yeah, it's pretty good, because it's probably got the majority of what most people want. But obviously having that flexibility of having Android and being able to just install the apps manually, any Android app that you want to actually install, I think in long term that's actually a much better option. It supposedly the Vidaa system is supposed to be faster. I found the initial click on your settings and things like that, there is a little bit of a lag there. So I'm not buying the fact that this is purely down to the fact that this is a faster or more streamlined operating system. I think it's more down to the fact that they probably wanted to penny pinch in a few areas, because I believe this one hardware wise is slightly different, because it actually has a slightly different TV tuner and a few other things that I'm guessing are sort of European requirements for the projector to be classed as a TV, whereas I think internationally, as long as it can take a satellite signal via a tuner, I think that's probably all that's needed, because most of the imagery I've seen, it doesn't actually look like the back of this particular projector. That whole section of the back of the projector is slightly different. So that's the second biggest difference, is the actual operating system itself and the fact that this doesn't run Android. Right, so the third biggest difference comes with regards to the actual, partly down to the software, and that is the actual picture modes. So what I'll do is for this, I'll just pull the actual tripod back and we'll boot it up, and this way you can actually get an idea in terms of how quickly the unit actually boots up as well. Okay, so now we're right at the back of the room, so you now should be able to see quite clearly how long it takes and everything like that. So what I'll do is, here you can see my Apple TV, so I'll just press TV now, and you'll be able to see how quickly it actually boots up. So the projector's already turned on. That is the sort of logo for the Vidaa TV. It's detected the soundbar. Now one issue is, for some reason, it always switches to the ARC port. I'm not sure why it does that, but basically if you hit the TV button again, it'll switch to HDMI 1 and then it should now boot up. There we go. Okay, so taking a look at the actual main Hisense remote, it's pretty decent. Buttons are laid out reasonably ergonomically, so everything's that you use quite often is generally where you probably want it. I'm not a fan of some of the buttons on it, and the fact that it doesn't have any quick shortcut for the actual picture settings for a projector, I think is a bit of a fail. But yeah, as I was saying, so the second sort of biggest issue with regards to this model is the fact that if I just hit the menu button and we come into the settings, so this is like the main menu that actually pops up. So you have subtitle, audio only, and then the settings. So subtitles obviously for subtitles. Audio only basically just switches off the projector, so if you want to just listen to audio and not have the projector on in the background. And settings, this is what brings you into the main settings. Now, just in this initial part, just there, you see a little bit of a, it's more of a UI sort of thing. It's basically jittery as it comes in. It's not smooth. Maybe that's just me being used to Apple and being used to higher refresh rates. Similarly, again, as the menu actually came into screen, there was a little bit of a jitter. It's not slow, it's not lagging behind or anything, but it has on occasion when I go down settings and I click stuff, occasionally it has taken a few seconds to actually catch up with it. Right, so the third sort of biggest issue that I was trying to get onto before I digressed was the picture modes. So as you can see, right now we are in HDR mode on the Apple TV, and what you'll notice, so just come down so then it doesn't go into the screensaver. So we have HDR standard, HDR day, HDR night, HDR dynamic, and HDR sports. There is no filmmaker mode on this particular projector. We don't get it in SDR and we don't get it in HDR. For whatever reason, they've basically not included the filmmaker mode in this particular model. I'm not sure if that's a hardware limitation or once again, it's just a software thing that they've done due to licensing or whatever other reason they've actually done what they do. In terms of the picture modes, there are quite a lot of sort of alterations that you can actually make. The biggest one is this one here, adaptive contrast. So this is essentially what changes your black levels and gives you that pop depending on whether you're watching it night or day. Obviously, as I've mentioned in the other video that I actually did for this, for my home theatre setup, during the day, because we're getting sideways light coming onto the screen, it's not as good as rejecting that sort of ambient lights from the side as it is from above. But I do have good light control in this particular room, so if need be, I can actually dim it out completely. But this is essentially the main sort of feature that you get in terms of making that image pop. However, what I've found is that when anything below medium, medium does an okay job, but really when you're actually watching content, you want to actually put it on high. But the problem is, from scene to scene, it's very stuttery. It jumps between brightnesses, and it's very, very noticeable how it's actually changing. So it doesn't do it gradually, and it doesn't do it from bright to dark. Sometimes when it's actually switched from a bright to a dark scene, it'll be about a second before it then boosts everything up again. And that sort of jump between the initial dark part of that scene and the bit where it brightens everything up is quite jarring, and it just takes your attention away from the actual content, and it brings it down onto the actual image in terms of the processing, which isn't what you actually want. If we just quickly go through all of the settings, because the settings are the same for every picture profile. So at the top, you have the option of applying whatever changes you apply to just your current source, so whichever HDMI port you're using, or for all sources. So generally, I'll use this for just current source, because we do have the PlayStation 4 Pro connected directly to the projector, and we definitely want different settings for that compared to just movies, sports, that kind of thing. Next, we have brightness. This obviously adjusts the black level. So at the moment, I've got it set on 51. This obviously boosts it quite a bit for the daytime viewing, but at night it is quite noticeable if you do have this too high. I believe 51 is roughly where I actually keep it. Contrast, daytime in particular, you do end up having to keep this maxed out. As you can see, once you actually reduce it, the image more or less disappears. So bright daytime viewing, I have it on 100. I believe for nighttime viewing, I've got it around about 80 or just below that. Color saturation, I am boosting that slightly. Once again, that goes to 100. Your sharpness, I don't think this goes to 100. This just goes to about 50, is it? Yeah, 50. And for most of the content I watch, generally it's quite high quality, so generally I'll keep that on 0 unless I'm watching sports, certain sports where I know it's going to be a worse stream, in which case I'll probably put down about 5, but generally I like to keep the sharpness on 0 and just have that natural softness come through. Adaptive contrast we've already looked at. Ultra smooth motion, this is basically MEMC, which is how it actually interpolates video, and what I found is for off, it's very, very good for movies, TV shows. You don't get any of the sort of soap opera effect. Any of the rest of these, I believe on sports, I either have it on smooth or clear, depending on what the sport is. So I have switched between the two of those and found certain sports work better with different settings. Noise reduction, all of these sort of noise reductions, generally I tend to leave them off. I don't want the projector doing any of that processing. Any noise that's meant to be there, I want to actually keep it there. Color temperature, I've got it on standard. You do have the options of warm, warm to, and cool. And expert settings is, it gives you your color gamut. So you have auto and you have native. What I've found is for most SDR streams or sources, I prefer to have this on auto, and for HDR I tend to keep it on native because it's just easier to actually balance the colors and everything with that. I've not gone into any of the additional settings because I don't have any calibration equipment, so I wouldn't be able to actually set any of this correctly. That's basically one of the biggest issues with this. Normally what I would do is I would use the built-in, if I just come to it, on the Apple TV. So for most other TVs, what I tend to do is just go into the settings on the Apple TV, and if you go to video and audio and come all the way down, it actually gives you the option to color balance your image, and you basically use your iPhone and you face it towards the TV, and it will actually do a check and essentially balance the colors for you. Now you can't do that with a projector, because as soon as you put it near the screen, it's either not detecting it because it's not bright enough or something, because it's a reflected image, or you end up blocking the image with the phone itself. So that's not something that you can actually do on the projector. Right, coming back out to the sort of main picture menu, you do have your game mode here as well. So whenever we've used the PlayStation, we have enabled that, and obviously that's supposed to give you better input response. It's not brilliant on this particular projector. You can make do, and obviously the big screen does make it quite immersive, but I wouldn't say this is a gaming projector by any means. You do have the option of enabling Dolby Atmos. This is both, well, it's primarily for the built-in speakers. Obviously, I have it set to, where's it gone? So when you go to speakers, obviously, it automatically detects that you have a soundbar connected, and it will switch to ARC. You do have the option of using a Bluetooth soundbar, the built-in one, or obviously the additional outputs on the back of the projector as well. I have digital audio out as pass-through. The other options are auto, PCM, Dolby Digital, and I believe the bottom one is Dolby Digital Plus. You do have the option for digital audio delay. Generally on the projector or screen or TV, whatever I tend to use, I don't actually do it on that device. What I'll do is normally on the soundbar itself, and I can normally get that dialed in quite nicely. Coming down next is the network section. So it connected to the internet relatively easily, and it connects every single time. You do have the option of an Ethernet port. I don't actually have it connected on this particular projector. I may plug it in, but generally there's not much apart from the smartphone app that I actually use the built-in internet for. So that's why at the moment I've just minimized the cables. I've not actually done it. Channel is obviously for your TV set, your actual terrestrial TV, and because I don't use it, I've not got anything plugged in, so that's not something that I can actually take a look at. Accessibility, you do have the option of changing from a dark to a light. I'm not sure why anybody would want such a bright menu, in particular at night, because this is quite bright in comparison to everything else. I prefer the dark sort of look. You do have the option of turning on higher contrast. You can change the transparency of the actual menus themselves. Once again, I just leave this on medium, that's why it comes on. And you have a few more audio options just there for visually impaired and hard of hearing. Down below we do have, this is more of your sort of system settings. So your console settings is basically everything to do with setting up the projector. So you have the option of having it how I got it set up, where it's in front. You have the option of front ceiling, you have the rear option and rear ceiling as well. Next you have your sort of geometric correction. So if we just quickly take a look, this is basically what I was talking about in the home theater video, where essentially it projects this grid, and the idea is that as long as you've got your screen within the checkered part, the automatic correction can actually fix any sort of misalignments of the screen or projector, your floor, the console, all of those kind of variables. This just gets everything dialed in, so it's got all the screen within the screen, and you don't have any overshoot, which is it can be distracting depending on your room. In my particular room, because I've blacked it out, it's not that much of an issue. You then also have the option of manual correction as well. So if you wanted to, and the automatic one didn't quite dial it in quite right, you can come in here and manually dial it in. Obviously you can only go in from where you initially set it. So on this particular one, I can't go out any further, I can only come in, because that's the maximum I had it set to. Doing that obviously does reduce resolution, because it's essentially just cropping in. So I wouldn't actually recommend using that too much. And eye protection is basically where it dims the screen. I've got it disabled just because I was doing the video earlier on, and I didn't want it constantly dimming and giving the warning. Generally, if you turn this on, then it will dim the screen as soon as you get near it, obviously just to protect kids' eyes, things like that. Below that you do have obviously your normal sort of settings for timers, time, system pin, parental controls, your language, location, and then you have a few voice services. So you do have Amazon Alexa as well as Google Smart Home that you can set up. I believe I did set up the Alexa platform, but I don't think I've used it, and I don't think I probably would, simply because I'm a HomeKit kind of person. So unless it gets HomeKit support, I probably won't be using that. Application settings, this is more to do with what you're sharing, cookies, essentially tracking, and it also gives the option of removing your Netflix account from this particular device, so it's no longer showing, so you can use it, because generally I think Netflix do limit it in terms of how many devices you can actually have connected at one time. HDMI CEC, so you do have the options, and what you do have to do is, if you do connect a console, or if you want to actually set your set-top box like the Apple TV to a higher resolution, then you need to come in here and change it from standard to enhanced. That'll then give you the option of basically doing HDR as well as 4K 60. It does have all the options for CEC. However, when I switch off any of my devices, my soundbar, my PlayStation, my Apple TV, it doesn't turn the projector off, so you still have to turn the projector off manually. It does give you the option of actually turning any of those devices on from here if they're not already actually switched on. But it doesn't do it the other way around, which I'm not sure why devices do that. I think it might be a HDMI 2.1 thing, because every single HDMI 2.1 device that I've ever used does switch off, and most of the HDMI 2.0 ones don't. So that could possibly be it. Below that you do have a few more Bluetooth options, so if you want to pair additional remotes or the speakers, that kind of thing. And then you have, this is quite standard, so you have your home and your store mode, essentially just boosting everything and putting it into a different mode for people that want to just demo stuff, maybe boost the brightness slightly whilst losing some of the accuracy in terms of colors and your actual picture profile settings. And your advanced settings, this is just where you get your name, you get PVR and time shift options. You do have, now this one I have actually disabled, so this is the actual light that shows up on the front of the projector just there. It's not actually that noticeable because the projector is generally so low in terms of how you're mounting it. It doesn't actually catch your eye that much. It is relatively bright, but because you're looking up and you're not necessarily looking in that direction, it doesn't actually catch your eye. But as I say, I did disable this, but even when you disable it, the light still stays on, so I'm not sure whether it needs a reboot before it actually does that. The projector itself does also have a built-in screensaver. It's just pictures, and it's just kind of random when it comes on. I think it only comes on when no source is actually connected. So if you have a source connected that's not like the Apple TV where it has its own built-in screensavers, then that won't necessarily work. You do have the option of changing your input labels, and you can actually do this on several of the other screens as well. So even when you go change via the input screen, you can actually edit all the names and everything on that particular screen as well. You have notifications. Now, I don't think I've had any notifications. Obviously, I've disabled some of them, but I don't think I've had any pop-ups or anything like that come up just yet. Your setup wizard is obviously if you want to go back to the start and redo everything from essentially when you first turned it on, and your power on mode is what you want the projector to do once you have a power cut, essentially. So do you want it to boot straight up, turn on, go to standby, or just remember what it was in terms of the last state? So I've got it on standby just as a sort of precaution. And finally, you have all of your sort of support and system stuff down at the bottom. Now, originally I couldn't actually find the app. It does actually have a very good app. I'm very impressed by the actual app. I may just do a separate video on the actual app itself, just showcasing some of the features, because adjusting picture settings in particular is a lot easier once you actually download the app. The rest of the functions aren't necessarily that good. However, whenever you're adjusting the picture settings, it's way more useful having the app to be able to do it rather than using the remote and actually having the on-screen menu, because when you're adjusting through the app, you see the changes in effect, but you don't actually see the menu. So you don't have the sort of pop-up bar and everything taking up space as it is right now. All you see is the changes that you're actually applying, and it does apply relatively quickly, and it applies obviously whatever you're doing on the image that you're actually on. So it's just a better way of doing it, in my opinion. So yeah, the software was the sort of third option. Just there you can see I do actually have it set up where it's already using this remote to actually control my Apple TV. So certain functions I can actually use just this particular remote for. However, I actually prefer the Apple TV remote. That's why I still have that sort of nagging thing of having to use two remotes. Okay, now obviously this is a sort of package deal, so you get the projector and you also get the screen as well. I did speak about the screen briefly in the home theater video, but essentially the screen is the same. If you go for the 120-inch, then the only option you get is this 0.4 gain screen, which I think daytime viewing, as you can see, on this kind of setup with this sort of image, it appears really washed out. Now, the image that you're going to be seeing is probably more washed out in comparison to what I actually see. What I'll do is I'll just quickly use my iPhone, and the colors are never right on the iPhone when I'm recording this particular projector. I'm not sure why. It's something to do with the red hue that's actually coming off the projector itself. However, what I've found is when I'm recording using the iPhone, it's somewhere in between. So what you see on the screen, if I can try and get this to focus in, so what you're seeing on the screen there in comparison to what the iPhone's recording and what I'm seeing, it's kind of in between. So it's not quite as dark or as washed out as the camera is showing, and it's also not quite as bright and vivid as the iPhone's recording, because the iPhone's basically doing a Dolby Vision encoding on top of the recording essentially. But it's viewable. It's definitely viewable during the day. But the screen itself, as I mentioned before, relatively easy to set up. All you need to do is just follow the instructions. Wall mounting it, once again, it wasn't too difficult working out all of the dimensions and everything. One thing I did want to just kind of showcase was how far away I've actually got it from the wall. Now, according to the paperwork that I actually found, it recommends that the 120-inch model is meant to be 14 inches away from the actual screen. So if I just get a tape measure, and this is going to be a little awkward doing this one-handed. Now, I think my unit, if I just bring that in, as you'll be able to see there, is roughly around about, oh, you're not going to be able to see that, are you? It's roughly around about 16.5 inches away from the actual wall. Now, some of that could be to do with the height of the screen. I believe if I take the screen higher, then I can actually push that in further and actually have the cabinet closer to the wall. However, one thing that I have actually found is, this is obviously just my room setup and it works for me, but having it slightly further away from the wall does actually mean that if I need to access anything behind, there's just about enough space where I can get in behind and mess around with wires, whatever I need to do, without having to actually worry about knocking the projector or anything. As you can see, most of it hasn't actually moved or gone out of line too much. I think I have just nudged that bottom edge over the last two videos, but generally it's quite accurate, and it stays pretty much where it's meant to stay. In terms of noise, it's not that loud. The motorbike outside is probably louder than what you're actually hearing from the actual projector itself. In terms of looks and sort of the feel, the sort of build quality and everything, it does look nice. I like the darker colors. It goes well with the sort of color scheme in my room. I like the sort of fabric covered hex pattern that they actually have wrapped all around it. It is an absolute dust magnet, so as you can probably see from the top of there, it is absolutely covered in dust. I think that some of that is just down to the fact that I've literally just redone this room, and obviously new carpet, so there's a lot of fibers and everything that are loose still, that aren't quite getting picked up by the vacuum and getting sucked up. But yeah, it is going to attract a lot of dust. Now, one thing, I'm not sure how well this can actually come across on video. When I look at the laser from this angle, it looks very, very red. And one thing that I have noticed is towards the bottom, sort of, I'd say bottom third, around about this region here, I've noticed a very significant red hue in darker images. So basically, whenever you've got the black bars for cinema content, what I find is on the actual letterbox bars, you do get a red hue. Now, it's not noticeable in content. So when I've got something like, when I've got an image like this where I've got white all over the screen, I don't necessarily see the red hue in any content. So I'm not sure what that is. If I just come there again, without obviously looking at the lens itself, the image or the laser that's actually getting shone seems very, very red to me. So it's predominantly red that's actually being reflected there. So I'm not sure whether that's just a calibration thing or a picture mode thing, but yeah, that's something that I noticed that I've not seen in any content yet, but anywhere where there's nothing on screen, so it's meant to be just black, there is a red hue to it. So I'll wait and see whether that's just a kind of running thing, or whether that's something that, I don't know, maybe a fault with the actual unit itself, or whether it's something that just goes away by itself. It may just be like that. Maybe that's not necessarily a defect, but it might just be how it actually works, where that particular color of light or laser just always shines whenever you've not got any content on there. So that was the first look at the Hisense 120L9G. I will have follow-up videos further down the line. I will also be doing a audio test for those who are interested. I know people are going to ask, what did the speakers, I believe it has 40 watt speakers in the 120 inch version compared to my soundbar setup, so I'll do a comparison video for that. I'll try and get some content video as well, so I can actually show you a comparison of the different picture modes, because that's not something that I've been able to do in this particular video either. If you do have any questions about this particular model, or just ultra short throws or anything like that in general, just drop them down in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload any new videos. And I'd really appreciate if you also give this video a thumbs up and share it with as many people as possible. Other than that, thanks very much for watching.